Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. I hung out in Park City with my wife this weekend and the dogs, and it snowed again, by the way, as I was driving to the airport, a snowstorm. It's like May 5th. So, I was thinking about this, that, there's been a lot of instances in my life where a team makes a run. Sacramento was like this during the Kobe years, where they make a run, they get really close, and you think to yourself, oh, this could be like an 8-year run. And then they have a really bad loss in the playoffs and they're never the same. I mean, Sacramento, light the beam. I mean, we all felt like this is the beginning of something big. Lose to the Warriors. It just didn't feel the same this year. These young teams, Oklahoma City, Minnesota, just jumped over them. Indiana jumped over them. And so, it's interesting when I look at the Knicks. You can make the argument, hey, they're going to move Randall. They're going to get somebody in here. It's going to be great. But to get somebody in, they're going to have to get rid of a few Josh Harts. You got to be very delicate. This is a Tibbs team. These veteran guys, they don't want to practice like that. They don't want to play 45 minutes. So the Knicks are fascinating. I thought Philadelphia would win this series. And by the middle of game 2, I'm like, oh, yeah, New York's a better team. They're winning the boards. They're better late. They're better coached. It just felt like, you watch series and you're like, oh, by the way, we may feel this by halftime of Minnesota-Denver. You're like, oh, there's a real problem here.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting with the Knicks, I can also argue this. Jimmy Butler was hurt. Both Dame and Giannis were hurt. Sixers have a shit ton of cap space and 3 potential picks. Indiana's getting better. What if Orlando takes a big swing and gets a member of the Phoenix Suns, right? Do you buy? Because you're going to have to give up some of those nice, maybe a Villanova guy. They're such a hustle effort team. Is this, you can't take it for granted. The East this year stinks. Its depth is all-time bad. Do we both believe, hey, they're just going to add a KD or a Paul George and they're going to take a leap? Or is it a delicate ecosystem there in New York and a beat-up Eastern Conference, and reality may smack them in the face next year?
So a huge part of their identity right now is the hustle, right?
Oh, yeah.
Their offense kind of reminds me of the Allen Iverson 76ers teams, where Jalen Brunson is kind of just totally taking that responsibility on by himself. But it's mixed with hey, as soon as Jalen shoots, just everyone crash the offensive glass and go get the rebound. That's basically what it is. And it's Isaiah Hartenstein, excellent offensive rebounder. Mitchell Robinson, excellent offensive rebounder. Josh Hart, excellent offensive rebounder. Dante DiVincenzo, excellent offensive rebounder. And that's just kind of what they do. So the thing, though, is you have to be careful if you include somebody like OG Anunoby in a trade like that, because the physical profile of the Knicks is vitally important, in my opinion. And I think you can get away with giving up, for instance, I think if I had to choose between giving up Hart and DiVincenzo in a deal or an OG Anunoby, I would be doing whatever I could to hold on to OG. Because if you get Kevin Durant at this phase of his career, older, right, and he's not as physically strong as a guy like OG Anunoby, you alter the physical profile of the team to the point where you're not as imposing. Because OG is a big part of what you're capable of doing on both ends of the floor in terms of that physical identity. And so I think they have to be careful. You're going to fundamentally change your identity as a basketball team by making a deal like that, because you go from being the bully offensive rebound out hustle team to now we're a classic 2-star built on offensive firepower and a little bit more of that overall offensive skill. So you got to find a way to kind of toe that line between the two, because you don't want to lose that toughness identity, because that toughness identity is a huge part of how you're winning. Right. But I think if they could somehow pull in a legitimate scoring forward, someone like a Paul George or Kevin Durant, without giving up that OG Anunoby slot, I think you could be in good shape. This is where it's an advantage that you have the picks that you have, and that you have as many good players as you have. Because if you had to give up a Mitchell Robinson, you have Isaiah Hartenstein. If you have to give up an Isaiah Hartenstein, you have Mitchell Robinson. If you have to give up a Dante DiVincenzo, you know who's a hell of a player? Deuce McBride. That, and he's a guy that can guard on the perimeter and do a lot of that stuff. So they have enough depth to where they can give up from different spots. But if I'm Phoenix and you're like, you want Kevin Durant, I'm like, I want OG Anunoby. And so it's going to be tough. It's going to be a hard negotiation.
Yep.
But if they can somehow keep Jalen, OG, one of the centers, and then get one of those big forwards, that's a really good team. That's a team that you'd be probably picking out East.
Well, and you live in Arizona, and we've talked about this, is that you can get more for Booker. But remember, Phoenix was not good pre-Chris Paul, so he's not a leader guy, and he can't carry a franchise. And then you disappointed this year with Durant and Beal around Booker. Booker's your classic, catch shoot. I don't think he's a great athlete. He's a dependable 25, 26 a night. He can be really streaky and get into the 35 for long stretches. Like, he's a crazy streak shooter. But I think you make the mistake if you, like in Orlando, if Orlando made a move, Boncaro's your one, to me, it feels like. And Booker comes in as a really good two, but I'd want another scorer at the forward, some size, some length. So, like, if you're Phoenix, now Beal and Kevin Durant, well, if you get rid of Booker, I got to get some young players over here because those guys are going to miss some spots, although Durant played a ton this year. So my take is you're Phoenix. You can bring it all back, but there are issues. You don't have a classic point guard. You don't have much of a bench. So those are real issues. You can keep bringing stuff back, but it's like at some point you have holes, right? We see like Milwaukee. You can bring it all back, and they may have to because they don't have a lot of assets, and this is an old roster. They're all locked up. I don't think that many people want. I think Dame you could move and Giannis, but they don't want to move those two. So my takeaway is you watch a lot of Suns basketball. Who would you move? Where would you move them? Because it feels like to me, people are going to get more phone calls than any team in the league. Because there's a lot of New York Knicks and Orlando's out there looking at Phoenix thinking it ended poorly. They want to get out of stuff. They don't want to say it publicly. Phoenix is saying, hey, we're bringing the band back together, but it's a flawed team. Vogel likes bigs. It's not built for him. What would you do?
But you have to say that too. You can't be like, fire sale this summer. You come and get them. But like as far as I'm concerned, so much of this comes down to how you view Booker. And a lot of Suns fans view him as like a bona fide franchise cornerstone. Yeah. And the thing they point to there is the 2021 season. But it's like, okay, hold on a second. Let's filter through that. The conference finalists out west was a team led by Paul George, okay, without Kawhi Leonard. And Trae Young made the conference finals out east. Like the Bucks won that series with Giannis had a hyperextended knee over the last couple of games. So like really that was the weird COVID season where all the good teams got hurt. Yes. All the good teams got hurt. The Lakers got hurt. The Nuggets got hurt. The Miami Heat got hurt. Like everyone was hurt in that season. So like it was kind of this gap year, totally legitimate championship for the Bucks. But like the Suns getting to the finals, I think got them to believe in Devin Booker as this like franchise cornerstone. I look at Devin Booker more as like the Kyrie Irving type of archetype. If I could put him next to a franchise player and he can just focus on being a late game shot maker / guy that can spell your star for stretches and run the offense, that's the kind of fit that I like. And so when I look at the Suns situation, Bradley Beal, I think, is a really good player, but his trade value is low because he's older, injury prone, and on a long-term deal that pays him a shit ton of money, right? Yeah. Kevin Durant, really good player, but old and just in a situation where like he doesn't have as much value around the league. Devin Booker is a guy that you can trade and get a haul. And so, and so what I was pitching is like, have the self-awareness to embrace the fact that Devin Booker's not going to be your franchise cornerstone, and then be like, okay, well, how do we turn this situation into something more fun? I would call Orlando and I'd be like, hey, you got Paolo Banchero, but you just lost a series to the Cavs because nobody can create a shot other than Paolo and no one can make jumpers. So like you need somebody that can come in and just be like a skill guard next to Paolo Banchero. And so if I would call them and I'd be like, I want Jalen Suggs, I want Jonathan Isaac, and I want Wendell Carter Jr. That's a lot. That is a haul. Those are three really good.
Hey, Suggs was viewed as a bust 6 months ago.
Exactly. And to Suggs' credit, he's turned himself into one of the best perimeter defenders in the league and a good three-point shooter, right? Like he's a very valuable archetype. So now if I'm the Suns, I'm looking at it. And by the way, you might be able to even coax Orlando into throwing you a draft pick or two in that deal. Who knows, depending on how that conversation would go. But then I look at it and I'm like, okay, now I've got I've got Jalen Suggs, an elite point of attack defender, something Phoenix did not have last year. I've got Bradley Beal still a high-powered number 2. I've got Kevin Durant and Jonathan Isaac, 2 really rangy, long wings that can do a lot defensively. And I'm going from Yusuf Nurkic, a slow-footed big center, to Wendell Carter Jr., who is a big, strong, athletic young center who can shoot the 3 ball. And so it kind of creates like a more fun Phoenix Suns team. And it's just an acknowledgement of the reality that you weren't going to be able to rebuild around Booker and then go into these series with him as the best player. Because like if you go into a series with Devin Booker as your best player or into a playoff run, you're going to run into a lot of teams that have better players than Devin Booker. You just are. And so that problem's not going away. And if I'm Orlando, I'm looking at it like Paolo's a franchise cornerstone.
Yes.
But clearly this build where it's like we're big and strong and athletic, but nobody can shoot, no one can dribble, no one can pass.
They can't shoot.
That's not working either. And so I look at that as like, we'll figure out the rest later. Give me Devin Booker at age 27.
Yep.
Next to my young star who just averaged 27 points per game in a 7-game series against an elite defense when no one else on his team could make anything and he had to do everything. It was a really impressive series from Paolo, and he's got a lot of that like physical imposition on the game that is super valuable.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting trade because I think what Orlando could provide is what Phoenix needs. And I thought it was going to be better, but the more I watched Phoenix, and I watched them a lot, I'm like, yep, too much duplication, doesn't work. Need more size, need a better wing defender. They just got to make moves. Yeah, I've said this all the time in the NFL. It's okay to make mistakes. Just don't double down on them. Don't convince yourself Daniel Jones of the Giants is a top 10 quarterback. That's the mistake. Not saying, hey, we missed on a draft pick. Everybody misses on draft picks.